Hello and welcome to the first session of Karen's Colours for 2026. This is going to be one of those monthly colour forecasts, but before embarking on a reading for January 2026, I'd like to remind us all that this is a traditional time to review the past year before setting out our goals and resolutions for the upcoming year. If you've already done those resolutions, then maybe you might like to consider them in the light of what I present today. We're going to be examining the progress made, the setbacks encountered, the challenges that we've overcome, and the work that has been left undone. But before we begin, thank you once again for attending this session. I know that there are not many of you that do so, but I'm certainly hoping that those of you who do will get something positive out of these readings. The reading itself is going to be rather truncated because I'll spend most of the time looking at 2025 in review. We're going to be examining the colours of the main skills and experiences that you've had, the colours of the primary blockages or deficits that have afflicted you throughout the year. And the review will encourage you to think where you're going to go next. There'll be creation of New Year's resolutions that are involved, but those, of course, are very personal to you. And of course, because we make New Year's resolutions, there are lots of goals to be set, lots of ideas about where we want to go next. There is an importance in reviewing past experience so that we can create a future path. And that future path will be denoted by one colour card for January 26. And I'm going to also give you an oracle card to help guide the way. But otherwise, the reading will be extremely truncated. Certainly, enjoy. And welcome now to the people who were born in the month of August. So let's see what a review of 2025 will bring. Looking back at February 2025, when these readings began, you started off with a preponderance of blue, closely followed by some orange. Now, blue is always about organization. It's about nurture. It's about security. It's about making sure that everything that needs to be done is done. It's your duty. At the same time, you are also being disrupted by a number of shocking type of issues, problems that arose out of the blue, ones that were unexpected, and you had to reorganize your life to move around these. By March, the colors had changed, and the preponderant one here was green. You suddenly found yourself with freedom to choose something different. There were opportunities available to you. But by April, you'd had to either have made a choice or else to withdraw and reset your goals. That's what the black and brown were all about. Now, that black and brown continued through into May. So you were still needing to withdraw. You still needed to set some goals. But now those goals and that withdrawal was also accompanied by the duty that had to be carried out. There were things that needed to be done, and you were the only one available to do them. By June, there was an opportunity to change direction, but because of the pink, you were fairly vulnerable to not being able to make that active choice. You indeed found yourself needing assistance from others in order to be able to move ahead. And that assistance was either not forthcoming or the choices that you made came to very little, because by July, there was a great need to withdraw. The black says, take time out, move away from whatever it is that you were doing and go somewhere else. By August, that black had consolidated into purple. Purple means that there was a complete disruption of everything that had gone beforehand. There was a need to change something dramatically. Now, that might have meant having to pull things down and start all over again, but it certainly was change in the offing. By September, of course, you were working hard on your goals. You had established a great deal of energy, as seen in all of the red that was there. but at the same time, the brown enabled you to not only set goals, but also to develop the practical skills that were necessary to go ahead to do these. An issue that did arise in September, however, was that all that hard work may have been overwhelming, because by October, you were absolutely and utterly exhausted. November saw you recover with all of that red coming back into your life, and you were able to once again take charge and move forward. By December, it had gone again, however, and now with all of that last surge of energy removed from your life, you were back to those responsibilities that you needed to deal with. And at the same time, you needed to balance several of them, because there were things that needed to be done that you hadn't really considered beforehand. So there was a good deal of confusion and uncertainty about where to start. So all in all, there were three colours that predominated throughout 2025 for you. The most important one of these was black. And then you had a certain amount of red and brown in equal measure. The black was all about withdrawal, depression, and recovery from issues that had beset you. Red, on the other hand, was passion, frustration, and energy. You certainly wanted to achieve something, and chances are that you had the energy and drive to go ahead and do so. At the same time, the brown was all about goals and practical skills and being grounded. So there was this ability to move forward, to set yourself some goals, some ambitions, to work on some practical skills, and to do all of this at the same time as you were keeping to yourself. You were moving away from the things that normally would keep you active in the real world, and instead concentrating on your internal world. Now, when we look at the issues and obstacles that you were facing at the time, in February, you had a certain number of colours that were missing from your life, and that set a baseline. By March, that baseline had settled into two colours, purple and pink. Purple is all about change, it's about disruption, it's about catastrophe that occurs. And pink is all about vulnerability and the inability to do for yourself, having no energy, requiring assistance. And while that occurred in March, it also continued through April and May and June and July. And it wasn't until we got to August that all of the disruption disappeared. And by that stage, you were absolutely exhausted. So by your birthday month, you were feeling as though you simply couldn't move on. Yet by September, the disruptions came back again, and they maintained themselves in October, only this time they were accompanied by a great deal of learning and juggling of resources so that you could manage everything that was on your plate. In November, the vulnerability, that feeling of exhaustion, had disappeared, and instead, here you were having fun, getting on with whatever it is that you had learned and consolidated, and putting together a certain degree of quiet into your life. And that brought you to December, where you ended up with yellow and purple being the dominant colours. Now, the interesting thing about yellow and purple is that they are opposites on the colour wheel. So here we have a situation where you're moving from extreme joy to extreme fun, to extreme disruption, to extreme stress. So there were lots of different things happening in your life at that time. When we look at the overall appearance of all of the colours in your year that were a problem, yellow and purple continue to be the major issues. Purple, it was all about power and disruption, neither of which you were able to deal with terribly easily, but also it interfered with your imagination, with your ability to enjoy life as you would in childhood, and it was all about destruction and recreation of your life. Yellow, on the other hand, was about excitement and happiness, but also a great deal of anxiety and hypervigilance that you needed to deal with, as well as memory and learning issues. So all in all, what did that teach us about 2025? Well, for August-born people were able to maintain a great deal of secrecy and privacy about what energy was being expended in what direction, what goals they had. But all of this was undermined by an inability to manage the disruption, that is, to use your imagination in positive ways, and excitement. You couldn't manage exposure, having to declare yourself to the real world as to what you were really up to. And that can have been a bit of a problem for you. So let's now move on to some advice for 2026. I've chosen the Soul's Journey Oracle by James Van Praagh because it has a number of very short meditations that you can use to give yourself a daily boost of ideas to enable whatever decisions you need to make to come to some sort of positive outcome. But first, we need to find a color card that will give us guidance as to which direction to take in the first place. All right, a single card for August-born people for 2026. And what we have here is black on yellow. It's an interesting combination because yellow internally is the management of stress. It's being able to hide your light, hide what you know, keep all of your skills and expertise under wraps. That's what the black is about. Now, why would you need to do that? Well, basically, it's so that you can keep something in reserve that you can use at a later date for yourself, rather than exposing yourself to any form of backlash that comes from basically knowing an awful lot of stuff that other people wish they knew. Let's have a look at what the Oracle has to offer us. Now, that's interesting. Surrender. I can release my need to control. Well, August people, how much control do you need? Well, the black tends to suggest an awful lot. Black is the ultimate in control. You are keeping everything secret. You are keeping everything under wraps, including your intelligence. So maybe you are indeed needing to be able to release some of that control. Maybe you don't really need to hide yourself, your abilities, your skills, your knowledge to the extent that you have been. Maybe it's time to come out from under that black cloud you've been living under and shine your light out there for the world to see. Who knows? It's entirely up to you. Well, I hope you've received something positive out of that annual review and have taken on board the small color reading and affirmation as a guide towards 2026. Certainly, looking at these readings from an annual perspective, a retrospective, I've come across a number of insights, both for myself, but also on behalf of those people that I know that have birthdays in the various months that I have been reading for. And one of the things that's come up here is whether or not I would even bother to continue with these. I feel hopeful that I should. I also feel as though I need to make some alterations. If you can think of suggestions that might make these more user-friendly, if you've been following the readings at all, you might even find that there's something in them that you might like to comment about. And I'd really appreciate those comments, because right now I'm in a dilemma, which is why I haven't actually done a full reading for every month, for every birthday month for January. It all depends on the results of this reading as to whether or not I continue. I have a lot to contemplate. My black is quite prominent too. Anyway, if you're new here and you haven't actually seen these before, you might think they're a bit confusing. That's part and parcel of a colour reading. It's something that most people will never have experienced. So I wish you all the best for 2026, and hopefully we'll meet again for more colour readings. If not, plenty of other things I can talk about that have to do with colour. Until next time, bye.